Silas Boone's hands shook as he counted out 42 cents for the telegram. Money that should have bought feed for dying cattle. The words he'd scratched on paper burned worse than shame. Need hardy wife. Ranch failing. Arrive before Christmas. Not love. Survival. Outside, another heifer collapsed in the snow, the 14th this month, poisoned by something he couldn't see or stop. The bank had given him 90 days. He had 63 cattle left, and no idea what was killing them. When Clara Whitmore stepped off the stage 3 weeks later and looked at his ranch with a diagnostician's cold assessment instead of a bride's hopeful smile, Silas realized he hadn't ordered a wife at all. He'd summoned a reckoning. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button and stay with me until the very end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. Now, let's get back to Silas and the woman who would change everything. The telegram had cost Silas 42 cents he didn't have. He stood in the Bitter Creek telegraph office with frozen mud caked on his boots and the kind of exhaustion that made his bones feel like they were dissolving. The operator, a thin man named Peterson, who'd watched half the ranchers in the territory go under, didn't meet his eyes when he counted out the coins. "You sure about this, Boone?" Silas's jaw tightened. "Just send it." "Mail order bride's a hell of a gamble when you can't feed yourself." "Didn't ask for commentary. Asked you to send the wire." Peterson shrugged and tapped out the message to the Missouri Matrimonial Agency. Silas watched each click of the key like it was sealing something he couldn't take back. Maybe it was. Outside, the December wind cut through his coat like it had a personal grudge. His horse, Sorrow, named back when he still had a sense of humor about things, stamped her feet against the cold. Silas hauled himself into the saddle and turned toward home, if you could still call it that. The ranch that had been in his family for 11 years looked like God had given up on it halfway through creation. Fences sagged under snow that wouldn't melt until April. The barn listed to one side like a drunk. And the cattle, Christ, the cattle. They were dying. Not all at once. That would have been a mercy. They died slow, 1 or 2 a week, staggering and confused until they just collapsed. Silas had lost 14 head in the last month alone. The meat was no good. Something in them went wrong from the inside. He'd tried everything. Changed their feed, moved them to different pasture, spent money he didn't have on a veterinarian from Laramie who'd taken one look, shaken his head, and charged him $20 for the privilege of saying, "I don't know." The bank knew, though. The bank knew exactly how many cattle he had left and exactly how many more months he could pretend this was all going to work out. Harlan Crow, the bank's man, had made that clear 2 weeks ago. "Spring," Crow had said, standing in Silas's kitchen like he owned it, which, technically, he almost did. "You've got until spring to make your payments current, or we foreclose. That's 3 months, Boone. Get right with God, and get right with your debts." Silas had wanted to put his fist through Crow's face, had wanted it so bad his hand shook. But wanting didn't change math, and the math said he was drowning. So he'd done something desperate. He'd ordered a wife. The reply came back faster than he expected. Clara Whitmore, age 28, Missouri, unmarried, no family. References available upon request. She could arrive before Christmas if he sent travel money. He sold his dead wife's wedding ring to pay for the ticket. Sarah had been gone 3 years. The influenza took her quick, which was something, at least. She didn't suffer long. But she'd left him alone in a place that took 2 people to survive. And he'd been losing ground ever since. He told himself Sarah would understand. Told himself this wasn't betrayal, just mathematics. He wasn't sure he believed it. Clara's train was due on the 18th of December. Silas spent the days before her arrival trying to make the ranch look less like a graveyard. He burned the dead cattle he couldn't bury in frozen ground. He patched the worst holes in the barn roof. He scrubbed 3 years of bachelor filth out of the kitchen until his hands cracked and bled. None of it helped much. The morning Clara arrived, Silas stood on the platform in town and watched the train come in through blowing snow. His stomach felt like he'd swallowed barbed wire. What the hell was he supposed to say to a woman he'd bought like livestock? The train hissed to a stop. Steam billowed. Passengers stepped down. A merchant, 2 miners, a family with loud children. Then her. Clara Whitmore was not what Silas expected. She wasn't frail, wasn't delicate. She stood maybe 5'6", solid through the shoulders, wearing a brown traveling coat that had seen hard use. Her hair, dark and pulled back severe, showed streaks of early gray. Her face had the kind of angles that made her look like she was always calculating something. She saw him, the only man on the platform who looked desperate enough to be waiting for a mail-order bride, and walked straight over. "Mr. Boone." Her voice was flat, Midwestern, no romance in it whatsoever. "Miss Whitmore." He reached for her bag. She handed it over without ceremony. "Mrs. Boone, as of 3 days ago. Judge in Kansas City married us by proxy. Saves time." Silas blinked. We're already married, yes. The agency handles it. Simpler legally." "You have a problem with that?" He should probably have a problem with that. But mostly, he just felt relieved he didn't have to go through some awkward ceremony in front of the town. "No problem." "Good. Is that your wagon?" He nodded toward the buckboard he'd borrowed from his neighbor. His own had a broken axle he couldn't afford to fix. "Ranch is an hour north. Roads are bad." "Roads are always bad in winter." She climbed up without waiting for help. "Let's go. Daylight's wasting." The ride north was the longest hour of Silas's life. Clara didn't make small talk. Didn't ask about the town or the weather or any of the polite nothing that people usually hide behind. She sat beside him in silence, watching the landscape like she was memorizing it. Finally, she spoke. "How many head?" "What?" "Cattle. How many do you run?" 63. Had 77 in September." "You lost 14 in 3 months." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, what's killing them?" Silas's hands tightened on the reins. "Don't know. Bet couldn't figure it. They just get weak, stop eating, die." "All of them, or specific ones?" "What?" "Are the deaths random, or is there a pattern? Age, location, which pasture they graze?" Silas had to think about that. No one had asked him that before. "Mostly the ones drinking from the South Creek. The North Spring cattle they're doing better, actually." Clara's eyes sharpened. "Show me the South Creek when we get there." "It's just water. If your cattle are dying and there's a pattern, it's not just water. Show me." Something in her tone made Silas shut his mouth and nod. They reached the ranch as the sun was going down. Clara stepped down from the wagon and stood there, perfectly still, looking at everything. The sagging barn, the patched fence, the cattle huddled against the wind, ribs showing through their hides. Silas waited for her to cry, or complain, or get back in the wagon and demand he take her back to town. Instead, she walked straight to the nearest heifer. The animal was one of the sick ones. Silas could tell by the way it stood. Head low, legs trembling, eyes dull. Clara circled it slowly, studying it from every angle. Then she did something that made Silas's breath catch. She lifted the heifer's lip and looked at its gums. pressed her fingers against its neck, ran her hand along its spine, feeling each vertebrae. How long has this one been sick? Week, maybe. She stopped eating 3 days ago. She's not going to make it. Clara's voice was clinical. But the others might. Take me to the South Creek. Now. It's nearly dark. Then bring a lantern. Move. Silas grabbed a lamp and led her across the frozen pasture to where the creek ran through a narrow ravine. The water looked clear enough, moving fast, no ice yet. Nothing obviously wrong with it. Clara knelt at the edge, dipped her fingers in, tasted it. Silas stared. What the hell are you? Copper. What? There's copper in this water. Not enough to kill fast, but enough to poison them over time. Where's the source? Upstream. Is there mining? Silas felt something cold slide down his spine that had nothing to do with the weather. Crow. Harlan Crow, the banker. He's got mining interests about 2 miles west. But that runoff shouldn't be reaching my creek. Well, it is. Clara stood, brushing snow off her skirt. And it's killing your cattle. Which means someone either doesn't care or doesn't want you to know. Jesus Christ. Jesus isn't going to fix your water supply. But I might be able to. She turned and walked back toward the house, leaving Silas standing there with a lantern in one hand and his entire world view shifting under his feet. He caught up with her at the porch. Who the hell are you? She paused, hand on the door. I told you. Clara Whitmore. Your wife. That's not what I mean.
You, the way you looked at that cow, the way you tested the water, that's not normal.
Normal women don't survive, Mr. Boone. I learned that young. She pushed the door open. I apprenticed with the traveling livestock healer for 6 years. Learned more about cattle sickness than most veterinarians know. When the agency asked what skills I had, I told them. They said you needed help on a ranch. So here I am. They didn't tell me. You didn't ask. You asked for hardy and accustomed to hardship. That's what you got. She stepped inside, looking around the sparse kitchen. This the only room with heat? Stove's in here. Bedroom's got a fireplace, but I haven't. Light it. We need to talk strategy, and I'm not doing it freezing. Silas lit the bedroom fire, while Clara unpacked a single bag that held almost nothing. 2 dresses, a nightgown, a Bible, and a leather journal filled with handwritten notes and diagrams. When he came back, she had the journal open on the kitchen table. Sit. He sat. Clara flipped through pages covered in careful handwriting. Symptoms, treatments, case studies. Copper poisoning presents in stages. First, appetite loss. Then weakness, stumbling. Jaundice in the gums and eyes. Eventually, liver failure. If your cattle have been drinking from that creek all fall, the ones that are sick now are probably too far gone. But the ones that aren't showing symptoms yet, we can save them. How? Move them away from the contaminated water immediately. All of them, tonight if possible. They need clean water and iron supplementation to bind the copper in their systems. We'll need scrap iron, molasses, and time. Silas rubbed his face. The North Spring. That's where they go. All of them. How many hands do you have? None. Just me. She looked up sharply. You're running 63 head alone? Can't afford help. Can't afford to lose more cattle either. We move them tonight. You and me. It's, what, half a mile to the north pasture? Through snow, in the dark. Miss Whitmore, Mrs. Boone, she corrected. And I didn't come here to watch your ranch die because you're too careful. We move them now, or we lose them. Your choice. Silas stared at this woman he'd known for less than 3 hours. This woman who'd tasted poison water and diagnosed his dying herd, and was now telling him to drive cattle through a blizzard in the middle of the night. "You're serious?" "I don't joke about livestock." She stood. "Get your warmest clothes. We're burning daylight we don't have." They drove the cattle north in darkness so complete Silas could barely see his own hands. The wind howled. The snow came sideways. The sick animals stumbled and fell, and some of them didn't get back up. Clara walked beside them, shouting encouragement, physically pushing the weak ones forward. She didn't complain, didn't hesitate. When one heifer collapsed completely, Clara knelt beside it in the snow. "She's gone." "Leave her." "No." Clara's voice was hard. "We mark where she falls. Tomorrow we examine her. We need to confirm the diagnosis." By the time they got the surviving cattle to the north pasture, Silas couldn't feel his feet, and Clara's lips were blue with cold. But the animals were drinking clean water, bunched together against the wind, alive. They stumbled back to the house as dawn broke gray and terrible. Inside, Clara collapsed into a chair. Her hands were shaking, not from cold, from exhaustion. Silas built up the stove fire and put coffee on. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Clara said, "How much debt?" "What?" "To the bank. How much do you owe?" Silas swallowed. $1,800, due in March. "Do you have it?" "No." "Can you get it?" "Not unless cattle prices triple and 60 head suddenly becomes 100. Clara was quiet. Then, "The poisoning, if Crow's mining operation caused it, he's liable, legally." "Crow owns the bank. He's not going to sue himself." "No, but if we can prove it publicly, he loses political capital. And politicians care about capital more than they care about one failing ranch." She pulled her journal closer. "We need evidence. Water samples, soil samples from upstream, testimony from other ranchers. Are you the only one affected?" "Martinson, 2 ranches south. He lost cattle this fall too." "Then we build a case. Document everything. Create a pattern he can't deny." Clara looked at him, and for the first time, Silas saw something in her eyes besides calculation. "You ordered me because you were desperate. I came because I was desperate too. But desperation makes people do interesting things, Mr. Boone. Sometimes it makes them survive." Silas wanted to say something, wanted to thank her or apologize or he didn't know what. Instead, he just nodded. They slept in shifts that first day, one watching the cattle while the other rested. When Silas woke in the afternoon, Clara was already outside, examining the dead heifer they'd left in the south pasture, making notes in her journal with fingers that could barely hold the pencil. By evening, she had 3 pages of observations and a theory that made Silas's blood run cold. "It's not accidental runoff," she said, showing him mineral deposits she'd scraped from the creek bed. "This is concentrated. Someone's diverting water intentionally." "Why the hell would... to drive you out? Buy your land cheap. There's precedent." She tapped her journal. "I documented a case in Kansas 2 years ago. Mine owner poisoned 3 small ranches, bought them at foreclosure, sold them to the railroad for 4 times what he paid." "Crow." "Probably, but we need proof, real proof, not just theory." The next morning, Clara started mixing the iron tonic, scrap metal boiled in water, strained, mixed with molasses to make it palatable. They dosed every animal in the north pasture, forcing the liquid down resistant throats. By the 3rd day, the first heifer stood longer, walked steadier. By the 5th day, 3 more were eating again. Town started to notice. Peterson, from the telegraph office, rode out, curious about the miracle cure people were whispering about. Then Martinson, then others. Clara met them all with the same flat professionalism. Explained the copper poisoning, showed them her notes, offered to test their water if they paid for materials. Some laughed. Some got angry. But some, the ones whose cattle were dying too, they listened. And that's when Harland Crow showed up. He rode onto Silas's property on the 8th day like he owned it, which again, he almost did. 2 men with him, hired muscle, not bankers. "Boone, heard you got yourself a wife." Silas stepped onto the porch. Behind him, through the window, he could see Clara watching, listening. "News travels. News does. Also heard she's been spreading stories about poisoned water, making accusations. She's been saving my cattle." Crow smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "See, that's interesting. Because those cattle were used as collateral on your loan. Which means if they're sick, the collateral's devalued. Which means technically, you've been in violation of our agreement for months." Silas's stomach dropped. "That's not, but I'm a reasonable man." Crow leaned forward in his saddle. "So here's what I'm offering. Sign over 60% ownership of this ranch to me. Call it a restructuring. And I'll forgive the immediate debt. You keep working the land, I get the profit until the loan's settled. Fair deal?" "That's not a fair deal. That's theft. That's business. You've got until Christmas to decide. After that," Crow shrugged. "Well, banks don't like bad collateral." He wheeled his horse around and left, his men following. Silas stood there, frozen, until he heard the door open behind him. Clara stepped out, her journal in her hands. "How much of that did you hear?" "All of it." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "We've got 16 days until Christmas." "Yeah." "Then we've got 16 days to prove he poisoned your water. Document it so thoroughly he can't deny it. And make enough public noise that foreclosing becomes political suicide." Silas turned to look at her. "That's impossible." Clara met his eyes. "You ordered a wife you couldn't afford because you were drowning. I married a stranger because the alternative was worse. We're already doing impossible things, Mr. Boone." She walked back inside, already writing in her journal, already planning. And Silas, watching her go, realized something that should have terrified him, but somehow didn't. He'd ordered companionship. What he'd received was a weapon. And Clara Whitmore Boone was just getting started. Clara was already dressed and outside before dawn, testing water samples with chemicals she'd pulled from her bag like some kind of traveling medicine show. Silas watched her through the kitchen window, wondering what the hell kind of matrimonial agency taught women chemistry. He brought her coffee. She took it without looking up. "The concentration's higher 200 yards upstream. Someone's definitely diverting runoff directly into your creek bed." "Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but I will." She corked a glass vial and labeled it with shaking hands. The cold was brutal. "I need to see Crow's mining operation. Up close." "That's trespassing." "That's evidence gathering. There's a difference." "Not to Crow's men." Silas pulled his coat tighter. "They catch you snooping around up there, they'll—" "What, shoot a woman? In Wyoming territory, where women are rarer than gold?" Clara finally looked at him. "They'll escort me off the property, firmly. And while they're doing that, I'll be counting waste barrels and memorizing drainage patterns." "You're insane." "I'm methodical. Come on." They rode upstream as the sun came up weak and gray. The landscape was all frozen emptiness, sage and snow and rocks that looked like God had thrown them there in anger. Crow's mining operation sat in a valley where the creek originated, a mess of shacks and equipment and men who looked like they'd kill you for a hot meal. Clara studied it from a ridge above, making sketches in her journal. "See that runoff pool? It's not natural. They dug that channel specifically to bypass the settling pond. All that copper-contaminated water flows straight into the creek system." "Jesus." Jesus didn't dig that ditch. Crow did. Or had someone do it. She closed the journal. We need testimony from his workers. Someone who will admit they were told to divert the runoff. No miner's going to testify against the man who pays him. Not while he's still paying them, no. Clara's eyes were calculating again. But fired workers? Men with grievances? They might sing a different tune. You can't just, I can, and I will. Take me to town. The ride to Bitter Creek took an hour. Clara spent it in silence, her mind clearly working through something Silas couldn't see. When they hitched outside the general store, she turned to him. I need you to go to the land office. Get copies of all mineral rights filings in this county for the last 2 years. I don't care what it costs. Clara, do you trust me? It was the first time she'd asked him a direct question that wasn't about cattle or water or business. Silas looked at her, this woman he'd known for barely a week, this stranger who'd diagnosed his dying herd and was now building some kind of legal case he didn't fully understand. Yeah, I trust you. Something flickered in her eyes. Not quite softness, but close. Then get the records. I'll meet you at the telegraph office in 2 hours. She walked into the general store before he could ask what she was planning. The land office clerk was a weasel-faced man named Simmons who charged Silas $3 for copies he should have gotten for free. But the documents were there. All of Crow's mineral filings, his water rights claims, his property acquisitions over the last 18 months. Silas spread them on a table in the back room and started reading. What he found made his hands go cold. Crow had filed water diversion permits for 6 different properties. 6. All of them small ranches. All of them currently in foreclosure, or about to be. The pattern was right there in black and white. He gathered the papers and headed for the telegraph office. Clara was already there, talking to Peterson in low tones. When she saw Silas, she nodded once. Did you find it? 6 properties, all the same pattern. Good. Mr. Peterson's been very helpful. Turns out 3 of those properties sent telegrams to the Territorial Mining Office last year complaining about water contamination. The complaints were filed, and then nothing. No investigation. No follow-up. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. I probably shouldn't have told her that. You should have told someone a long time ago, Clara said, but not unkindly. How much does Crow pay you to keep quiet? Peterson went pale. I'm not accusing you of anything illegal. I'm asking a practical question. Does he pay you? Yes or no? $10 a month, to let him know if anyone sends wires about his business. Clara pulled out a small notebook. Write that down. Sign it. Date it. I can't. If he finds out, he won't. Not until we're ready. Clara's voice was steel wrapped in honey. But when we are ready, your testimony will help save 6 ranches and maybe your own conscience. Write it down, Mr. Peterson. Peterson wrote. His hand shook the whole time. Outside, Silas grabbed Clara's arm. You can't just... You're collecting evidence like you're building a legal case, but we're not lawyers. What the hell is your plan here? Clara pulled her arm free. My plan is to make it politically impossible for Crow to foreclose. To create enough public pressure that the territorial judge has to investigate. To expose him so thoroughly that even his own bank board turns on him. She started walking toward where they'd left the wagon. I've done this before, Silas. Not exactly this, but close enough. When? She stopped. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, Kansas, 3 years ago. A cattle buyer was cheating ranchers on weight, using rigged scales, buying herds at half value. I documented it, built a case, took it to the territorial newspaper. He lost everything. Her voice was flat. He also burned down my employer's barn in retaliation. Killed 12 horses. That's when I learned that truth and justice are great ideals, but they require strategy. Jesus Christ, Clara. I didn't tell you because it doesn't matter. What matters is we have 16 days, now 15, and I know how to build an airtight case. But I need you to decide right now if you're with me or if you want me on the next train back to Missouri. Silas stared at her. This woman who'd shown up with one bag and a journal full of knowledge that could save him or destroy them both. I'm with you. Then we keep moving. The next week was a blur of long days and short nights. Clara interviewed every rancher within 20 miles, documenting cattle deaths, water problems, foreclosure timelines. Some slammed doors in her face. Some called her a troublemaker. But some, the desperate ones, the ones who'd already lost everything, they talked. Martinson gave her soil samples from his south pasture. Widow Hendricks showed her dead cattle she'd had to burn. Old Tom Brennan, who'd already lost his ranch to Crow 6 months ago, sat in Silas's kitchen and told them exactly how the foreclosure happened. Came real friendly-like at first. Said he could restructure my debt, give me more time. All I had to do was sign over partial ownership. Tom's hands shook around his coffee cup. I signed. Figured I had no choice. 2 months later, he called the whole loan due. Said I'd violated terms I didn't even know were in the contract. Took everything. Clara wrote it all down. Every word. Every detail. At night, she and Silas worked by lamplight, organizing evidence into categories. Water contamination. Fraudulent contracts. Witness testimony. Financial patterns. The kitchen table disappeared under papers. You should sleep, Silas said around midnight on the 10th day. Sleep's a luxury. Clara didn't look up. We've got 6 days until Christmas. 6 days until Crow demands your answer. We're not going to have enough, are we? She finally met his eyes. I don't know. Maybe. If we can get one of Crow's workers to turn. Someone who actually dug that drainage ditch, who can testify it was deliberate. That's not going to happen. It might. Clara pulled out a piece of paper. There's a man named Jack Wheeler. Worked for Crow until last month. Got fired for drinking. He's bitter, broke, and living in a boarding house in Rock Springs. If anyone would talk, it's him. Rock Springs is 2 days' ride. Then we leave tomorrow. Clara, it's December. There's a storm coming. There's always a storm coming. She stood. We go to Rock Springs. We find Wheeler. We get his testimony. That's the plan. And if he won't talk? Then we make him want to. Clara closed her journal. You asked me who I was when I got here. I'm someone who survives, Silas, whatever it takes. Are you? He should have said no. Should have told her this was insane, that they'd freeze to death on the road, or Wheeler would refuse to talk, or Crow would find out and retaliate. Should have done the sensible thing. Instead, he said, We leave at first light. The ride to Rock Springs was hell. The temperature dropped below 0. The wind cut through every layer of clothing. Twice they had to stop and build fires just to keep from freezing. Clara never complained, just kept riding, her face set like stone. They reached Rock Springs on the 11th day before Christmas. The town was a coal mining cesspool. Drunk miners, desperate women, violence simmering just under the surface. Clara walked into the boarding house like she owned it. I'm looking for Jack Wheeler. The landlady, a hard-faced woman with suspicious eyes, looked Clara up and down. He owes you money? No, I'm offering him some. That changed things. The landlady pointed upstairs. Room 6. He's probably drunk. Wheeler was definitely drunk. He answered the door in his undershirt, reeking of whiskey, eyes bloodshot and mean. "Who the hell are you?"
Clara Boone. This is my husband, Silas. We need to talk about Harlan Crow.
Wheeler's face darkened. "Nothing to talk about."
We'll pay you $50 for an hour of your time.
That stopped him. $50 was more than most miners made in 2 months. "Come in." The room was a disaster. Bottles everywhere, filthy clothes, the smell of rot and desperation. Clara sat on the only chair like it was a throne. Silas stood by the door, watching.
You worked for Crow's mining operation, Clara said. Not a question.
Yeah, until that bastard fired me.
Why'd he fire you?
Said I was drunk on the job. I wasn't.
Well, not that day anyway.
Wheeler grabbed a bottle, took a swig. Truth is, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Clara leaned forward.
What did you see?
Crow and his foreman, digging a drainage channel from the waste pond straight into the creek. I asked what they were doing. Foreman said it was none of my business. Crow said if I mentioned it to anyone, I'd regret it. Wheeler laughed bitterly. Week later, I was fired, blackballed from every mine in the territory.
Would you testify to that? In writing?
Wheeler's eyes narrowed. Testify? You building a case against Crow?
Yes.
Then you're stupider than I thought. Crow owns half the judges in Wyoming. You think testimony from a drunk miner is going to change that?
It will if there are enough of us.
Clara's voice was quiet, certain.
6 ranches, Mr. Wheeler. 6 families destroyed by the same pattern. Water poisoned, cattle dead, foreclosures filed.
If we can prove it was deliberate, if we can make enough noise that the territorial government has to act. They won't. Wheeler took another drink. You'll just make yourselves targets. We're already targets. Silas spoke for the first time. I've got 6 days before I lose everything my family built. If there's even a chance your testimony helps, I'll take it. Wheeler looked at him. Really looked. Then at Clara. $50? Clara counted out the money. $50. And your statement in writing, signed and dated. Wheeler wrote for 20 minutes, his handwriting shaky but legible. When he finished, Clara read it carefully, then folded it into her journal. If this goes to trial, we'll call you as a witness. If this goes to trial, I'll probably be dead. Wheeler pocketed the money. Crow doesn't lose, Mrs. Boone. Men like him never do. Men like him lose when people stop being afraid. Clara stood. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Wheeler. They rode back through the darkness, pushing hard to make time. Silas could see Clara's exhaustion in the way she swayed in the saddle, but she never asked to stop. You think his testimony's enough? He asked.
No, but it's another piece. Another crack in Crow's armor.
She was quiet for a moment.
We need one more thing. Something dramatic. Something that forces the town to choose sides.
Like what?
I don't know yet.
Her breath came out in white clouds.
But we've got 4 days to figure it out.
They reached the ranch on the 13th day before Christmas. The cattle in the north pasture were healthier, coats starting to shine again, eyes alert. The iron tonic was working. Survival was possible. But possibility wasn't the same as certainty. Clara spent the next day organizing all their evidence into a single, comprehensive document. Witness statements, water samples, financial records, timeline of foreclosures. She wrote with the precision of someone building a trap. Silas watched her work and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had nothing to do with business or survival, and everything to do with the stubborn set of her jaw
the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the way she fought for his ranch like it was her own. Because it was her own now. The proxy marriage made it legal, but this was making it real. Clara. She looked up. When this is over, if we survive this. When, not if. When we survive this, he corrected. I want you to know I'm grateful for everything. For you. Something softened in her face, just for a second. Don't be grateful yet. We're not done fighting. That night, Crow showed up again. This time he didn't bring hired men. He brought the sheriff. Silas and Clara met them on the porch. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Crow looked triumphant. Mr. Boone, Mrs. Boone, the bank has decided to accelerate your foreclosure date. Instead of spring, you now have until December 25th.
That's 2 days. Clara's hand found Silas's, squeezed hard. On what grounds? Her voice was steady. Devalued collateral due to cattle deaths. Failure to maintain property standards. Outstanding debts. Crow smiled. All perfectly legal. Sheriff's here to serve the official notice. The sheriff handed over papers. Clara took them, read them carefully. This is fraud. This is business. You've got 48 hours to pay $1,800 or vacate the property. Crow tipped his hat. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Boone. They rode away, leaving Silas and Clara standing in the snow with a death sentence in their hands. Clara read the notice 3 times. Then she looked at Silas. We're out of time. I know. Which means we can't wait for a trial or an investigation. We have to force this into the open. Now. Tomorrow. How? Clara's eyes were hard as winter stone. The Christmas gathering. The whole town will be there, Crow included. We present everything publicly. Make it impossible for him to hide. He'll destroy us. He's already destroying us. At least this way we go down fighting. She gripped his arms. I need you to trust me one more time. Can you do that? Silas thought about Sarah, about the ranch his father built, about 3 years of drowning slowly. Then he thought about Clara, this impossible woman who'd shown up with a bag full of chemistry and a will that wouldn't break. Yeah, I trust you. Then tomorrow we end this, one way or another. They didn't sleep that night. Clara sat at the kitchen table, copying her evidence documents by hand. 3 complete sets. 1 for the territorial judge, 1 for the newspaper, 1 for the town council. Her handwriting got shakier as the hours passed, but she never stopped. Silas made coffee and watched her work, feeling useless. There's got to be something I can do. There is. Go to every rancher we interviewed. Tell them to be at the Christmas gathering tomorrow. Tell them to bring their own evidence if they have it. Clara didn't look up. We need bodies, Silas. Witnesses. People willing to stand up in public and say Crow destroyed them. Half of them won't come. They're too scared. Then we get the half that will. She finally met his eyes. This only works if we're not alone up there. If it's just us making accusations, Crow dismisses it as sour grapes from a failing rancher. But if it's 6 families, 8 families, all telling the same story, that's a pattern. That's proof. Silas rode out at first light. His first stop was Martinson, who answered the door with a shotgun and suspicion. What do you want, Boone? Christmas gathering tomorrow. I need you there. Why? Because Clara's going to expose Crow, publicly, and she needs witnesses. Martinson laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. You're both insane. Crow will bury you. He's already burying me.
Foreclosures in 2 days. I've got nothing left to lose.
Silas gripped the doorframe. But you do. You still got your ranch. For now. How long do you think before Crow comes for you next? Martinson's face went pale. He wouldn't. He would. He did it to Tom Brennan, to the Hendricks widow, to 5 other ranches we know about. You think you're special? You think he'll stop? Silas leaned closer. Clara's got evidence. Water samples, testimony, financial records. Enough to make the territorial government investigate. But only if people show up. Only if we make enough noise that they can't ignore us. Martinson was quiet for a long time. Then, "What time?" 7 o'clock. Bring your soil samples if you still have them. I burned them. Didn't want the evidence in my barn. Then bring yourself. That's enough. By noon, Silas had visited 8 ranchers. 3 agreed to come. 2 told him to go to hell. 3 weren't home. It would have to be enough. He got back to the ranch to find Clara standing in the yard with her journal, talking to a man Silas didn't recognize. Thin, nervous, wearing a suit that had seen better days. "Silas, this is Mr. Edmund Pierce. He's a reporter for the Cheyenne Daily Leader." The man extended his hand. Silas shook it, confused. "Reporter?" "I sent a telegram yesterday," Clara said. "Told him there was a story about systematic fraud and water poisoning in Bitter Creek. He took the train overnight." Pierce pulled out a notebook. "Mrs. Boone's been filling me in. This is, if even half of what she's saying is true, this is significant. Multiple ranches, deliberate contamination, fraudulent foreclosures. The kind of story that gets territorial oversight involved." Silas looked at Clara. "You didn't tell me you contacted a newspaper." "I didn't want to get your hopes up in case he didn't come." She handed Pierce another folder. "This is everything. Water analysis, witness statements, financial patterns. I need you to verify it independently before tomorrow night." "Tomorrow night?" "The Christmas gathering. That's when we're making this public. I need you there." Pierce flipped through the documents, his expression growing more serious. "Jesus, this is... Mrs. Boone, do you understand what you're accusing? Harlan Crow has connections all the way to the territorial legislature. If you're wrong about any of this..." "I'm not wrong." Clara's voice was iron. "Test the water yourself if you don't believe me. Ride up to his mining operation and look at the drainage channel. Talk to the ranchers who've lost everything. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to do your job." Pierce looked at her for a long moment. Then he closed the folder. "I'll need to verify the water contamination. Can you show me the creek?" "Silas will take you. I've got work to finish here." Silas led Pierce upstream to the South Creek. The reporter brought his own testing kit. Basic stuff, but enough to confirm copper presence. He knelt at the water's edge, running tests with a careful precision of someone who'd done this before. "She's right. There's definitely copper contamination. High levels," he made notes. "How many cattle have you lost?" 14 since September. Would have been more if Clara hadn't figured it out." "Your wife seems remarkably well informed about livestock medicine." "She apprenticed with a traveling healer for 6 years. Knows more about cattle than most veterinarians." Pierce looked up sharply. "A woman veterinarian apprentice? That's unusual." "Clara's unusual." Silas watched the water flow past, carrying poison downstream. "She's also right about everything. Crow's been systematically destroying small ranches so he can buy them cheap. The water poisoning's deliberate." "Can you prove it's deliberate, beyond the contamination itself?" "We've got testimony from one of his former workers, a man named Jack Wheeler. He saw Crow and his foreman dig the drainage channel." Pierce wrote faster. "I'll need to interview him. He's in Rock Springs, drunk most of the time, but his statement's signed and dated.
I'll take the train tonight. If his story holds up, this is front-page material." Pierce stood, brushing snow off his pants. "Mrs. Boone, she knows this could put you both in danger, right? Crow's not going to take exposure lying down." "We're already in danger. Foreclosure's in 48 hours. Can't get much worse than losing everything." Pierce gave him a look that said it definitely could get worse, but he didn't argue. Back at the ranch, Clara had finished copying the documents and was now writing something else. A speech, Silas realized. She was preparing exactly what she'd say at the gathering. "The reporter believes you," he said.
"Good. That's one advantage," she kept writing. "Did Martinson agree to come?"
"Yeah, him and 2 others. Maybe more if word spreads."
"It'll have to do." Clara set down her pen. "Crow's going to be there tomorrow. So will the sheriff, the mayor, probably half the town council. When I stand up and start presenting evidence, there's going to be a moment, maybe 30 seconds, where they're too shocked to react. That's our window. We have to get through the key facts before Crow can shut us down."
"What if he doesn't let you speak at all?"
"Then I speak anyway, louder." She met his eyes. "This is going to get ugly, Silas. Crow might have us arrested, might try to physically remove us. I need you ready for that."
"I'm ready."
"Are you?"
Clara stood, came around the table.
"Because once we do this, there's no taking it back. We're burning every bridge. If we fail, we lose the ranch and probably end up in jail on some trumped-up charge.
If we succeed, we make a powerful enemy who'll spend years trying to destroy us." She took his hands.
"I need you to understand what you're risking."
Silas looked down at their joined hands, hers rough from work, his scarred from years of ranching. 2 desperate people who'd gambled everything on a marriage that started as a transaction and turned into something else entirely. "I understand. And I'm still with you." Clara's grip tightened. Then she let go and went back to her speech. They worked until midnight, refining her presentation, anticipating objections, preparing responses. When they finally went to bed, in separate rooms as they had every night since Clara arrived, Silas lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would save them or destroy them. The Christmas gathering was held in the town hall, a drafty building that smelled like pine and candle wax. By the time Silas and Clara arrived at 6:30, the place was already packed. Families, couples, children running around chasing each other. Someone had set up a small nativity scene. There was punch and cookies. It looked like celebration. It was about to become a battlefield. Crow was there, of course, holding court near the front, laughing with the mayor and several council members. He saw Silas and Clara enter, and his smile widened. He raised his glass in mock salute. Clara ignored him. She found a spot near the side wall and set down her satchel full of evidence. Silas stood beside her, scanning the crowd. Martinson was there. So was Widow Hendricks. Tom Brennan stood near the back, looking nervous. 3 other ranchers Silas recognized but didn't know well. 6 witnesses total, maybe 7 if Pierce showed up. The mayor called for attention at 7 o'clock sharp. "Welcome, everyone, to Bitter Creek's Christmas gathering. Before we begin the festivities, we've got a few announcements." Clara waded through the mayor's speech, through the pastor's blessing, through 2 children reciting poetry about snow and angels. Her hands were steady on her satchel, but Silas could see tension in her shoulders. Finally, the mayor said, "Anyone else have announcements before we move to refreshments?" Clara stood. "I do." Every head in the room turned. The mayor blinked. "Mrs. Boone, I didn't realize—" "I have evidence of systematic fraud and environmental poisoning that's destroying ranches across this county." Clara's voice carried clear and strong. And I intend to present it here, tonight, in front of witnesses." The room went dead silent. Crow's smile vanished. He set down his glass. "This is hardly the time or place. This is exactly the time and place. Christmas. A celebration of truth and justice and salvation." Clara pulled out her first document.
For the past 18 months, Harlan Crow has been deliberately contaminating water supplies to drive small ranchers into foreclosure so he can acquire their land at a fraction of its value. People started murmuring. The mayor held up his hands. "Mrs. Boone, these are serious accusations." "They're not accusations. They're facts." Clara held up a glass vial. "This is water from Silas Boone's South Creek, tested independently and found to contain copper levels 15 times higher than safe standards. The contamination comes from mining runoff, deliberately diverted from Crow's operation 2 miles upstream." "That's absurd," Crow said, but his voice was tight. "Mining runoff is regulated." "It's regulated if you follow the law. You didn't." Clara pulled out another document. "This is testimony from Jack Wheeler, former employee at your mine. He witnessed you and your foreman digging a drainage channel that bypassed settling ponds and sent contaminated water directly into the creek system. Signed, dated, and verified by a reporter from the Cheyenne Daily Leader who interviewed him last night." The murmuring got louder. Crow's face was turning red. "Wheeler's a drunk and a liar. Wheeler's a drunk with documentation, and he's not the only witness." Clara turned to the crowd. "Martinson, you lost cattle this fall?" Martinson stood slowly. "Yeah, 30 head. Same symptoms as Boone's cattle." "Widow Hendricks?" The widow stood. "I lost my whole herd. 42 animals." "Tom Brennan?" Tom stood. "Crow took my ranch 6 months ago. Used the same pattern. Sick cattle, devalued collateral, accelerated foreclosure." One by one, the other ranchers stood. 6 people total, scattered through the crowd, all telling the same story. The room was in chaos now. People shouting questions. The mayor trying to restore order. The sheriff looking uncertain about what to do. Crow pushed forward. "This is a coordinated attack by failing ranchers trying to blame their own mismanagement." "This is documented evidence." Clara's voice cut through the noise. "Water samples, soil samples, financial records showing you filed water diversion permits for 6 properties, all of which are now in foreclosure. Testimony from your own employees, a pattern so clear that even the territorial government can't ignore it. The territorial government doesn't care about a few dead cows and some hysterical claims from a mail-order bride who's been here less than a month." Crow's voice was rising. "You don't know anything about this territory or how business works here. I know how fraud works. I documented it in Kansas 3 years ago when a cattle buyer was using rigged scales to cheat ranchers. He's in prison now." Clara stepped forward. "I know how to build an evidence-based case. I know how to get newspaper coverage. And I know that men like you count on people being too scared or too tired to fight back." Crow's eyes narrowed. "You're making a serious mistake, Mrs. Boone." "The mistake was yours. Poisoning water, destroying families, thinking no one would connect the pattern." Clara turned to the mayor. "I'm formally requesting a territorial investigation into Crow's mining operations and land acquisitions. I have 3 complete evidence packets here. One for you, one for the territorial judge, and one for the Cheyenne Daily Leader." The back door opened. Edmund Pierce walked in, notebook in hand. "I'm Pierce, from the Leader. I can confirm I've independently verified Mrs. Boone's water contamination claims and interviewed Jack Wheeler. His testimony is credible and detailed. This story runs in tomorrow's edition." The room erupted, people shouting, the mayor banging his gavel.
Crow standing there, frozen, his political armor cracking in real time. Then Crow did something unexpected. He laughed.
You think you've won? You think one newspaper story and some paperwork changes anything? He turned to the sheriff. Arrest them. The sheriff didn't move. On what charge? Trespassing, harassment, theft of proprietary mining information. I haven't stolen anything, Clara said. Every sample was taken from public waterways. Every witness volunteered their testimony. Every document is either public record or personal property. Then slander, defamation, making false claims. Truth isn't defamation, Mr. Crow. Pierce was writing furiously. And attempting to arrest someone for presenting evidence at a public gathering? That's going to look great in print. Crow's face was purple now. You're all going to regret this. Every single one of you. Is that a threat? Clara's voice was quiet, dangerous. Because threatening witnesses in front of a crowd and a newspaper reporter? That's also going to look great in print. Silas watched Crow's control shatter completely. The man lunged forward, grabbed Clara's arm, and Silas moved without thinking. He stepped between them, shoving Crow back hard enough to send him stumbling. Don't touch my wife. The sheriff finally moved, stepping between them. That's enough. Everyone calm down. Calm down? Crow was breathing hard. These people are destroying my reputation with lies. Then you can file a lawsuit and defend yourself in court, the mayor said. His voice was shaking but firm. Mrs. Boone has presented serious allegations. They need to be investigated. Properly. You're taking her side? I'm taking the side of due process. The mayor looked at Clara. I'll forward your evidence to the territorial judge. If there's merit to these claims— There's merit, Pierce interrupted. I've verified enough to know this warrants a full investigation. Crow looked around the room, at the faces watching him, at the ranchers standing in silent solidarity, at his political allies suddenly finding reasons to look away. You'll all pay for this, he said quietly. Then he turned and walked out, his men following. The silence after he left was deafening. Then Widow Hendricks started clapping. Slowly at first, then faster. Martinson joined her, then Tom Brennan, then others. Clara stood there, her evidence packet still in her hands, looking stunned. The mayor cleared his throat. Well, that was— I think we're done with announcements. Let's move to refreshments? People started talking again, the volume rising. Several ranchers came up to Clara, shaking her hand, thanking her. Pierce was interviewing everyone, his notebook filling rapidly. Silas pulled Clara aside. Are you okay? I don't know. She was shaking now, the adrenaline draining. Did that actually work? You were incredible. I was terrified. She looked up at him. He threatened us in front of everyone. That means he's scared. That means we won. Silas took her hands. Clara, you just exposed the most powerful man in the county. You stood up there and destroyed him with nothing but facts and courage. We destroyed him. You were there. You stood with me. You did the work. You built the case. You trusted me. When everyone else thought I was crazy, you trusted me. Clara's eyes were bright. That's not nothing, Silas. They stood there in the middle of the chaos, holding hands, while around them the town slowly processed what had just happened. Pierce found them an hour later. I've got enough for 3 articles, maybe 4. This is going to be big, Mrs. Boone. Territorial big. Will it be enough to stop the foreclosure? I don't know.
But I can tell you that by tomorrow morning, everyone in Wyoming Territory is going to know Harlan Crow's name and what he's accused of. That kind of publicity? It makes it very hard for judges to rule in his favor. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was hope. They rode home through snow that had started falling again, gentle and quiet. The ranch looked different somehow. Still broken, still struggling, but not dying anymore. Clara went straight to the bedroom and collapsed on the bed, fully clothed, asleep in seconds. Silas covered her with a blanket and went to check the cattle. They were fine, healthy, surviving. When he came back inside, Clara was awake again, sitting at the table with her journal open. Couldn't sleep? Too much in my head. She looked up. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, the foreclosure deadline. I know. Even with everything we did tonight, Crow could still push it through, could still take the ranch. Then we'll deal with it. Silas sat across from her. Together. Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, I came here because I had nowhere else to go. No family, no prospects, no options. The agency said you needed help on a ranch, and I thought I could at least be useful. Earn my keep. Survive. You did more than survive. So did you. You could have sent me back when I started making trouble. Could have told me to stay quiet, not rock the boat. But you didn't. You backed me, even when it was dangerous. Silas reached across the table, took her hand. You saved my ranch, Clara. Maybe my life. Why would I stop you? Because most men would. Most men don't like their wives being smarter than them, more capable, more willing to fight. Then most men are idiots. He squeezed her hand. I ordered a bride because I was desperate. What I got was a partner. The best partner I could have asked for. Clara's eyes got bright again. We're not done yet. Crow's not going to give up. I know. But we're not giving up either. She smiled. Actually smiled. It transformed her whole face. No, we're not. They sat there in the lamplight, hands joined across the table, while outside the snow fell and Christmas approached, and somewhere in Bitter Creek, Harlan Crow was probably plotting revenge. But for right now, in this moment, they'd won. And that was enough. Morning came too fast. Silas woke to find Clara already dressed, standing at the window watching the dawn break over snow-covered pasture. Christmas Eve. The day they'd either keep the ranch or lose everything. You sleep at all? He asked. Couple hours. You? Same. She turned from the window. Her face was drawn tight, shadows under her eyes. Pierce's article should be out this morning. That'll put pressure on the judge. But Crow's had all night to make countermoves. What kind of countermoves? I don't know. That's what worries me. Clara moved to the table where her evidence packets still sat. We exposed him publicly, which means he can't operate in shadows anymore. But it also means he's got nothing left to lose. Men with nothing to lose do desperate things. Silas was pulling on his boots when they heard horses. Multiple horses coming fast. They both moved to the door. Through the early morning light, Silas counted 6 riders approaching. His hand went to the rifle by the door. Wait, Clara grabbed his arm. That's not Crow's men. She was right. The lead rider was the mayor, still in his good suit from last night. Behind him came Martinson, Tom Brennan, and 3 other ranchers. Silas stepped onto the porch. What's going on? The mayor dismounted, looking grim. We need to talk, all of us, now. They crowded into the kitchen. Clara put coffee on while the men stood around looking uncomfortable. Finally, the mayor spoke. Crow rode out this morning, before dawn. Took his foreman and about 10 men. Word is they're heading to Cheyenne to meet with the territorial judge personally. Clara's hand stilled on the coffee pot.
To do what? to convince him that your evidence is fabricated, that you're a troublemaker trying to destroy a respected businessman. The mayor pulled out a folded newspaper. Pierce's article came out this morning. It's damning, real damning. But Crow's got connections in Cheyenne. Money, influence. He's going to try to bury this before it goes any further. The article's already published, Silas said. People have read it. You can't unring that bell. No, but you can discredit the source. Make Clara look like a hysterical woman. Make you look like a failing rancher looking for someone to blame. Plant enough doubt that the judge dismisses the investigation before it starts. Martinson stepped forward. Which is why we're here. We're riding to Cheyenne too. All of us. We're going to testify in person. Clara looked at them. You'd do that? You stuck your neck out for us last night, Tom Brennan said. Figure we owe you the same. Crow's got a 6-hour head start, the mayor added. But if we ride hard, we can get there by tonight. The judge won't rule on Christmas Day, which means the actual foreclosure can't be processed until the day after. That gives us time. Silas felt something crack open in his chest. You're risking your own standing with Crow, your own ranches. He's been picking us off one by one, Martinson said. But together, maybe we actually got a chance. He looked at Clara. You showed us how to fight back. Now we're fighting. Clara's voice was rough. Thank you. Don't thank us yet. We still got to convince a judge. The mayor headed for the door. Get your horses. We leave in 20 minutes. They rode for Cheyenne through Christmas Eve morning, 8 riders pushing hard through snow and wind. Clara rode beside Silas, her journal strapped to her saddle, her face set with determination. Around noon, they stopped to rest the horses at a relay station. The proprietor, an old woman named Agnes, took one look at their group and shook her head. You're chasing Harlan Crow, aren't you? How'd you know? Silas asked. Because he stopped here 3 hours ago. Paid me $10 not to tell anyone which route he took. She poured coffee for them anyway. I'm telling you anyway, because I don't like men who buy silence. He went north through Patterson's Pass. It's faster, but dangerous in this weather. We can't match that route, the mayor said. Not safely. No, but you can cut through Miller's Canyon. It's rougher, but it'll save you 2 hours if you don't break your necks. Agnes refilled Clara's cup. That husband of yours, he worth all this trouble? Clara looked at Silas. Something passed between them, wordless but solid. Yeah, he is. Then you better get moving. Weather's turning. They took Miller's Canyon. Agnes was right. It was brutal. Narrow trails, steep drops, wind that tried to knock them off their horses. One of the ranchers' mounts went lame and had to be left behind, the man doubling up with Martinson. By the time they reached Cheyenne, it was dark and snowing hard. They rode straight to the courthouse, a stone building that looked like it could survive the end of the world. Crow's horses were tied outside. He's already in there, Tom Brennan said. We're too late. We're not too late until the judge rules. Clara dismounted, grabbing her satchel. Come on. They pushed through the courthouse doors to find Crow in the clerk's office, mid-conversation with a severe-looking man in wire-rimmed glasses. The territorial judge, presumably. Crow turned at the sound of footsteps. His face went from confident to furious in a heartbeat. What the hell are they doing here? Judge Morrison? Clara stepped forward. I'm Clara Boone. I'm the one who filed the evidence of water contamination and fraud. These men are witnesses, ranchers who've been affected by Mr. Crow's actions. Judge Morrison looked them over. This is highly irregular. Mr. Crow came here to convince you to dismiss the investigation before you actually investigate, Clara interrupted. Which is exactly what a guilty man would do.
That's defamation, Crow snarled. Judge, this woman is unstable. She's been in the territory less than a month, and she's made it her mission to destroy my reputation with lies. Water contamination isn't a lie. 14 dead cattle isn't a lie. 6 foreclosed ranches following the exact same pattern isn't a lie. Clara pulled out her evidence packet. I have documentation, independent verification, witness testimony. I'm asking you to review it before making any decisions. Judge Morrison took the packet, flipped through it briefly. This is extensive. It's thorough, Clara corrected. Because the truth requires thoroughness.
The truth, Crow said, his voice dripping contempt, is that this woman is a mail-order bride who showed up with some basic knowledge of livestock and decided to play detective. She's convinced a group of failing ranchers that their own mismanagement is somehow my fault. I saw you dig the drainage ditch. Everyone turned. Jack Wheeler stood in the doorway, swaying slightly, but sober enough to speak clearly. Edmund Pierce was beside him. Wheeler? Crow's face went pale. What are you? I'm testifying, like I told the reporter, like I'll tell anyone who asks. Wheeler walked forward, unsteadily. You paid me to dig that channel from the waste pond to the creek. Told me it was temporary. Told me it was legal. Then when I figured out it wasn't, you fired me and threatened me if I talked. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket. But I kept the work orders, your signature, dated, detailed instructions on exactly where to dig. The room went dead silent. Judge Morrison took the work orders, read them carefully. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air. Mr. Crow, these appear to show deliberate water contamination. Wheeler's a drunk. Those documents could be forged. They're not forged, Pierce said. I've verified the signatures with the county clerk. They're authentic. Crow's control was fracturing. You can't possibly believe what I believe is irrelevant. Judge Morrison set down the papers. What matters is evidence. And Mrs. Boone has presented enough evidence to warrant a full territorial investigation. Effective immediately, I'm freezing all foreclosure proceedings related to Mr. Crow's loans, pending the outcome of that investigation. You can't do that. I can, and I am. If you're innocent, the investigation will clear you. If you're not, Morrison's eyes were hard. Then justice will be served. Crow looked around the room, at all the faces watching him. At Clara, standing there with her journal. At Silas, beside her. At the ranchers who'd ridden through a blizzard to testify. At Wheeler, holding work orders that proved everything. This isn't over, Crow said quietly. Then louder, You think one investigation changes anything? I've got lawyers, money, connections that go all the way to... To where? Morrison cut him off. The territorial legislature? The governor's office? Because I guarantee you, by tomorrow morning, every newspaper in Wyoming will have this story. And politicians care more about public opinion than they care about your connections. It was the sound of power dying. Crow stood there, his face purple with rage and something else. Fear, maybe. The realization that he'd actually lost. He left without another word, his men trailing behind him like whipped dogs. The moment the door closed, Clara's legs buckled. Silas caught her, held her up while she shook with exhaustion and relief. We did it, she whispered. We actually did it. You did it, Silas corrected. You built the case. You stood up to him. We, she interrupted. We did this together. Judge Morrison cleared his throat. Mrs. Boone, I'll need you to stay in Cheyenne for a few days. Formal depositions, witness interviews, the full investigation process. Can you do that? Yes, absolutely. Good. There's a boarding house 2 blocks from here. Clean, safe, reasonable rates. Get some rest. We'll start fresh tomorrow. The ranchers left to find lodging, but Silas and Clara walked slowly through the snowy streets toward the boarding house.
Neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, Silas said, "The ranch is safe." "For now. Investigation could take months. Crow could still find ways to—" "Clara." He stopped, turned her to face him. "We won. Maybe not permanently, maybe not perfectly, but we won."
Can you let yourself feel that for 1 minute? She looked up at him, snow catching in her hair, and something in her face just broke open. "I was so scared. The whole time I was terrified we'd fail and you'd lose everything and it would be my fault for pushing too hard." "Hey, no." Silas pulled her close. "None of this is your fault. You saved me, saved the ranch, saved half a dozen other ranchers who would have lost everything if you hadn't stood up." Clara pressed her face against his coat. He could feel her crying, silent, shaking sobs that she'd probably been holding in for weeks. "I didn't come here to save anyone. I came because I had nowhere else to go." "I know. And I ordered you because I was drowning." He tilted her face up. But somewhere between that first night and tonight, this stopped being about survival and started being about something else. "What?" Silas kissed her. Not desperate, not hungry. Gentle, like a promise. When they pulled apart, Clara's eyes were wide. I wasn't expecting." "Neither was I. But Clara, you're the strongest person I've ever met. The smartest, the bravest. And somewhere in the last 3 weeks, I stopped seeing you as the woman I ordered and started seeing you as the woman I—" He trailed off, not quite able to finish. "As the woman you what?" "As the woman I want. Not because I'm desperate. Not because I need help. Because you're you." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I've never had anyone look at me the way you're looking at me right now." "How am I looking at you?" "Like I'm not just useful. Like I'm wanted, valued. Like I matter beyond what I can do." "You do matter. God, Clara, you matter so much." She kissed him this time, harder, like she was claiming something that belonged to her. They found the boarding house and took 2 rooms. Propriety still mattered, even in victory. But they sat up in Clara's room until nearly dawn, talking about everything they hadn't had time to talk about before. Her childhood, his marriage to Sarah, the years of struggle and loneliness that led them both to that matrimonial agency. "I don't regret it," Clara said finally. "Coming here, marrying you, any of it." "Even when I doubted you?" "You didn't doubt me. You questioned, which is different. Healthy." She leaned against his shoulder. "You trusted me when it mattered. That's what counts." They spent Christmas Day giving depositions. Judge Morrison was thorough, asking questions that made Clara reach for her journal a dozen times to verify facts and dates. Wheeler testified again, shaky but honest. The other ranchers gave their accounts. By evening, Morrison had enough to proceed with a full investigation. He assigned a territorial marshal to examine Crow's mining operation personally, to take official water samples, to interview everyone who'd worked there in the last 2 years. "This will take time," he told Clara. "Months, probably. But based on what I've seen, criminal charges are likely. Environmental destruction, fraud, possibly conspiracy." "What about the foreclosures?" "Frozen until the investigation concludes. If Crow's found guilty, they'll be dismissed entirely, and your husband's debt restructured." Morrison paused. "You did good work here, Mrs. Boone. Rare to see evidence presented this clearly." On the train back to Bitter Creek, Clara sat beside Silas and watched Wyoming Territory roll past the window. The land looked less harsh somehow. Still hard, still unforgiving, but survivable. "What happens now?"
she asked. We go home. We run the ranch. We wait for the investigation to finish. And then? And then we keep living. Together. Silas took her hand.
Unless you've got other plans. No other plans. Clara laced her fingers through his. But Silas, I need to tell you something about why I really came here. His stomach tightened. Okay. The matrimonial agency. I didn't just sign up because I had no options. I signed up because I'd spent 6 years apprenticing under a healer who taught me everything about livestock medicine, and then told me I'd never be taken seriously because I was a woman. Told me the best I could hope for was to marry a rancher who'd let me treat his animals as a hobby. Her voice was bitter. So when the agency said you needed help on a ranch, I thought maybe I could prove him wrong. Maybe I could actually use my knowledge. Matter. You do matter. More than you know. I'm starting to believe that. She looked at him. But I need you to understand, I'm not going to stop. Learning, studying, treating sick animals. If we're going to be partners, really partners, you need to accept that I'm not going to be a normal rancher's wife. Silas laughed. Actually laughed. Clara, you diagnosed copper poisoning in my cattle, built a fraud case against the most powerful man in the county, and testified in front of a territorial judge. Normal left the building 3 weeks ago. I don't want Normal. I want you. Relief flooded her face. Good. Because I'm thinking, once this investigation is over, once things settle, I could offer consultation services to other ranchers. Teach them what I know about livestock medicine. Build something that's not just about our ranch, but about the whole community. I think that's brilliant. You do? Clara, you saved 6 ranches by sharing your knowledge. Imagine what you could do if you made it your actual profession. He squeezed her hand. I'll support you however I can. She kissed him right there on the train, not caring who saw. They reached Bitter Creek as the sun was setting on the day after Christmas. The ranch looked the same. Still shabby, still struggling, still held together with prayers and fence wire. But it was theirs, and it was going to stay theirs. The cattle in the north pasture were thriving now, their coats shiny, their eyes bright. Clara walked among them, checking each one with practiced hands, murmuring approval. Silas watched her work and felt something settle in his chest. Not just relief, not just gratitude. Something deeper. Something that felt like home. That night, they sat together on the porch despite the cold. Clara had her journal open, making plans for her consultation service. Silas was sketching fence repairs on a piece of paper. We should probably actually have a wedding, Clara said suddenly. A real one, not just a proxy marriage. Silas looked up. You want that? I want people to know this is real, that we chose each other. She met his eyes. Did we? Choose each other? Yeah, we did. Then we should celebrate it properly. Spring, maybe. After the investigation wraps up. Something simple. Simple sounds perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, planning a future that 3 weeks ago didn't exist. The stars came out, brilliant and cold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Silas? Yeah? Thank you. For trusting a stranger. For believing in me. For standing with me, even when it was dangerous. Thank you for saving my life. Multiple times. He pulled her closer. We make a good team. The best, Clara agreed. And sitting there, on that broken-down porch, on a ranch that almost died, with a woman who came as a transaction and became everything, Silas Boone understood what survival really meant.
It meant not giving up. It meant finding strength in unexpected places. It meant partnership built on respect, not rescue. It meant choosing to keep fighting, together, no matter what came next. Winter dragged on. The territorial investigation moved slower than frozen molasses, and every day without resolution felt like standing on thin ice, waiting for it to crack. Clara filled the time treating cattle for neighboring ranchers. Word had spread about her diagnosis of Silas's herd, and desperate men started showing up at odd hours with sick animals and payment they could barely afford. She never turned them away. "You're going to bankrupt us doing charity work," Silas said one morning, watching her treat a rancher's heifer for bloat. "I'm building trust. When this becomes a real business, they'll remember." Clara pressed on the animal's side, measuring the swelling. "Besides, half of them pay in labor. We got 3 fences repaired last week." "That was payment?" "Everything's payment, if you negotiate right." By February, she'd treated animals from 14 different ranches. By March, she had a waiting list. Then the telegram came. Silas rode to town for supplies and came back white-faced, a yellow paper shaking in his hand. "What happened?" Clara met him at the barn. "Investigation's concluded. Judge Morrison wants us in Cheyenne next week for the ruling." Clara's stomach dropped. "Did it say?" "No, just that we need to be there." Silas handed her the telegram. "This is it. We either win or we lose everything." They didn't sleep that night. Clara paced the kitchen, running through everything they documented, looking for holes Crow's lawyers might exploit. Silas sat at the table, watching her wear a path in the floorboards. "What if we prepared all this evidence and it's not enough?" she said finally. "What if Morrison rules in Crow's favor anyway?" "Then we appeal. We fight." "With what money? What resources?" Clara stopped pacing. "Silas, if we lose..." "We won't." "You don't know that." "No, but I know you. I know how thorough you are, how careful." He stood, caught her hands. "Whatever happens in Cheyenne, we face it together. That's enough." It wasn't enough, but it would have to be. The train to Cheyenne was packed with ranchers. Martinson, Tom Brennan, Widow Hendricks, a dozen others who testified or lost land to Crow's schemes. They filled a whole car, nervous energy crackling between them. "He's going to walk," Martinson said quietly to Silas. "Men like Crow always do." "Not this time," Clara said. She didn't feel as confident as she sounded. The courtroom was standing room only. Press from 3 territories, curious onlookers, politicians sensing a scandal they could exploit. And Crow, sitting with 4 lawyers in expensive suits, looking like he'd already won. Judge Morrison entered, and everyone stood. He looked older than he had at Christmas, the weight of this case showing in new lines around his eyes. "Be seated. We have considerable ground to cover." For 2 hours, Morrison read findings. Water contamination confirmed by independent analysis. Drainage channels examined and found to match Wheeler's testimony. 6 ranches showing identical patterns of poisoning, foreclosure, and acquisition. Financial records revealing Crow had known about the contamination for over a year. Crow's lead lawyer kept objecting. Morrison kept overruling. Finally, Morrison set down his papers and looked directly at Crow. "Mr. Crow, based on the evidence presented and investigated, I find you guilty of deliberate environmental destruction, fraud, and conspiracy to unlawfully acquire property through systematic sabotage." The courtroom erupted. Crow shot to his feet. "This is absurd. You can't possibly..." "I can, and I have. All foreclosures related to your contaminated water systems are hereby dismissed. All debts restructured under territorial oversight. You are personally liable for damages to affected ranchers. Morrison's voice cut through the chaos. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the Territorial Attorney General for criminal prosecution. Bailiff, take Mr. Crow into custody. Crow's face went purple. You're making a mistake. I have friends. Your friends can visit you in prison. Morrison banged his gavel. Court is adjourned. The bailiff moved toward Crow. For a second, Silas thought the man might actually fight. His hands balled into fists, his whole body tensed. Then something in him just collapsed. They led him away in chains. Clara stood frozen, unable to process what just happened. Around her, ranchers were shouting, celebrating, crying. Martinson grabbed her in a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. "We won! You crazy woman, we actually won!" Silas found her in the chaos, pulled her close. "It's over. We're free." But Clara's mind was already racing ahead. "The restructured debt. We still owe money. The bank will want—" "Clara." Silas tilted her face up. "We won. Can you please, for once, just celebrate?" She tried to smile. Failed. Tried again. This time it worked. "We won," she whispered. Then louder. "We won!" The celebration lasted into the night. Ranchers bought rounds at every saloon in Cheyenne. Pierce interviewed everyone for follow-up articles. Judge Morrison even showed up briefly, accepting handshakes and thanks with quiet dignity. But Clara slipped away early, finding a quiet corner in the boarding house to sit with her journal. Silas found her there an hour later. "You okay?" "I keep waiting for something to go wrong. For Crow to have one more trick. For the ruling to be overturned." She looked up. "When does it feel real?" "Maybe it doesn't. Maybe we just wake up every day and keep working until we believe it." He sat beside her. "What are you writing?" "Notes for my consultation business. If we're really going to do this, I need to formalize everything. Rates, services, documentation standards." Her pen moved fast across the page. Martinson already asked if I'd consult on his breeding stock. Widow Hendricks once helped setting up a rotation system for her pastures. This could actually work, Silas. I know it could. I've been watching it work for 3 months. They returned to Bitter Creek to find the ranch transformed by something invisible, but powerful. Hope. The cattle were healthier than they'd been in 2 years. The fences Silas had repaired in trade for Clara's services stood straight and strong. Spring was coming early, snow melting into the kind of mud that promised new grass. But the real transformation was in town. People who'd avoided Silas for months now stopped him on the street to congratulate him. The bank, under new management after Crow's arrest, offered to restructure his debt at reasonable terms. The general store extended him credit. "Feels weird," Silas said, loading supplies into the wagon. "Being treated like I matter." "You always mattered." They just couldn't see it past their fear of Crow. Clara checked off items on her list. Fear makes people cruel. Freedom makes them decent again. That Sunday, the pastor asked Clara to say a few words at service. She stood at the front of the church, facing a congregation that had mostly ignored her for 3 months, and spoke plainly. "I came here as a stranger, a mail-order bride with nothing but knowledge and stubbornness. Some of you welcomed me. Most of you didn't. That's fair. I was strange and aggressive, and I made powerful people uncomfortable." She paused. "But I've learned something about this community. You're not cruel. You're not cowards. You're just people trying to survive in a hard place. And when you decided to stand together, when you chose truth over fear, you became something stronger than any one of us could be alone." Someone started clapping, then another, then the whole church. Afterward, Widow Hendricks approached her. "I judged you wrong, Mrs. Boone. Thought you were trouble.
I am trouble, just the useful kind. The widow laughed. I got a proposition for you. I've been running my ranch alone since my husband died. Been thinking about hiring help, but what I really need is someone who understands livestock. Someone I can trust. Would you consider a partnership? I provide the land and capital. You provide the expertise? Clara blinked. You want to go into business with me? I want to learn from you, and I want my ranch to survive. Seems like we could help each other. The widow extended her hand. Think about it. Clara shook it. I will. At home, she told Silas about the offer. He listened carefully, then asked the question she'd been asking herself. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to say yes immediately. But this ranch, what we're building here, I don't want to abandon it. You wouldn't be. We'd still run this place together. But Clara, you've got knowledge that could help dozens of ranches. Keeping it all here feels small. Silas took her hands. I married you expecting a helper. What I got was someone who could change this whole territory. Don't shrink yourself to fit what I first imagined. You mean that? Every word. By April, Clara had consulted for 18 ranches, treated over 40 head of cattle, and taught 3 ranchers' daughters basic livestock medicine. The money wasn't much, but it was steady. More importantly, it was hers, earned through skill, not charity. She accepted the partnership with Widow Hendricks under one condition. They'd train other women in livestock medicine, creating a network of knowledge that couldn't be destroyed when one person left. The first 3 apprentices started in May. The wedding happened on a Sunday in late spring, not because they needed to get married again, but because Clara wanted to stand in front of everyone and choose Silas publicly. No proxy, no desperation, just choice. The whole town came. Ranchers whose cattle she'd saved, families Silas's father had helped decades ago. Even Judge Morrison made the trip from Cheyenne. Clara wore a simple blue dress. Silas wore his best suit, the one he'd gotten married to Sarah in. That should have felt wrong, but somehow it didn't. Sarah was part of his history. Clara was his future. Both could be true. The pastor kept it short. Do you, Silas Boone, take Clara Whitmore Boone as your wife, chosen freely and loved completely? I do. Do you, Clara Whitmore Boone, take Silas Boone as your husband, chosen freely and loved completely? Clara looked at this man who'd trusted a stranger, who'd stood beside her against impossible odds, who'd believed in her when she barely believed in herself. I do. The kiss was gentle. The applause was thunderous. At the reception, held in their barn because it was the biggest space available, Martinson raised a glass. To the woman who saved us all by refusing to shut up and sit down. To partnership over possession, Tom Brennan added. To choosing to fight instead of accepting defeat, Widow Hendricks said. Clara stood and raised her own glass. To desperate choices that turn into something worth keeping. To strangers who become family. To survival that looks like victory. They drank to that. Later, when the celebration had wound down and the last guests had left, Clara and Silas sat on their porch watching the sun set over land they'd nearly lost. You ever regret it? Clara asked. Ordering a bride instead of doing things the normal way? Normal wouldn't have brought you here, so no, never. Silas pulled her close. You? I regret the desperation that made it necessary, but the choice itself, the man I found, the life we built, she kissed him. No regrets at all. A year later, the ranch was profitable. Not rich, but stable. The cattle numbered 90 head, all healthy. The barn had a new roof. The fences stood strong. Clara's consultation business had expanded to 3 territories. She'd trained 9 women in livestock medicine, each running their own practices. The network they'd built meant no single rancher faced catastrophe alone anymore. Knowledge flowed freely. Help came quick. She'd also published a manual on cattle diseases and treatments, sold through general stores across Wyoming. The money from sales funded scholarships for women wanting to learn veterinary medicine. Silas expanded the ranch slowly, buying 200 acres adjacent to their property from a rancher who retired. They ran the operation together, Clara handling the medical side, Silas managing the breeding and sales. People stopped seeing them as separate entities. They were the Boones, a unit, a force. One evening in December, almost exactly 2 years after Clara first arrived, they stood together watching their cattle graze peacefully on land they'd fought so hard to keep. "You know what I was thinking about today?" Clara said. "What?" "That telegram I sent accepting your proposal. I almost didn't send it. Almost decided staying in Missouri was safer than gambling on a stranger in Wyoming." "What changed your mind?" "I realized safe wasn't the same as alive. I was existing, not living. And I was tired of just existing." She leaned against him. "Coming here was terrifying. Marrying you was insane. Fighting Crow was suicidal. But it was also the first time in my life I felt like I mattered. Like what I knew and who I was had value beyond just surviving." "You matter, more than you'll ever know." Silas turned her to face him. "You saved my ranch, my life, and about 30 other ranches in the process. You built a business from nothing. You're changing how this whole territory thinks about women and knowledge and power. That's not just mattering, Clara. That's making history." "We're making history. Together." She kissed him. "That's the part that matters most." They stood there as the sun sank lower, painting the snow-covered land in shades of gold and pink. Somewhere in the distance, a calf bawled for its mother. Closer, their horses nickered contentedly in the barn. This land had nearly killed them both. The desperation that brought them together could have destroyed them. But instead, they'd taken that desperation and forged it into something stronger than either of them imagined possible. Not a rescue, not a transaction, not even just survival. A partnership built on respect, tested by fire, and proven through choice after choice after choice to stand together, no matter what came next. Clara had arrived in Wyoming as a mail-order bride, with 1 bag and a journal full of knowledge the world told her didn't matter. She'd become the woman who proved that knowledge, courage, and refusal to accept defeat could transform not just one life, but an entire community. And Silas, who'd ordered a wife because he was drowning, had learned that sometimes the best things in life come from the most desperate gambles, as long as you're brave enough to see the gift when it arrives, and wise enough to nurture it into something real. They'd both come to this ranch broken and desperate. They'd rebuilt it, and themselves, into something worth fighting for. That was the real victory, not the courtroom ruling, or the saved ranch, or the successful business, but the daily choice to be partners, to trust each other, to build something together that neither could have built alone. And as the stars came out over Wyoming territory, over land they'd earned through blood and sweat and stubborn refusal to give up, Clara and Silas Boone stood together and knew one truth with absolute certainty. Desperate beginnings don't determine worthy endings. Courage, partnership, and the refusal to stop fighting do.